Good morning. Welcome to Pro Auto Repair. I'm Mark. See Daniel over there hard at work, and you're watching Octane Auto Tips. Here you'll see behind me a cylinder head with an intake manifold attached to it. And here you see a 2002 Kia Spectra with a 1.8 liter. Reason for that being, this car suffered prolonged overheating, mainly because the radiator had burst. Somebody decided to use some stop leak or JB Weld or something on it, and we had advised the client to replace the radiator because that stuff rarely holds. Long story short, they did not replace the radiator until, obviously, it completely blew and the car overheated. After replacing the radiator, the car was exhibiting symptoms of failed head gasket. We went in, took a look, hence why everything's separated. The gasket wasn't too bad, but it was shot. And beyond that, even with a new gasket in place, machine cylinder head still wasn't having good compression. So our best guess is those piston rings are probably pretty fried, and that leaves us one of two options. One is to go in there, dismantle that engine, and rebuild it, or option B, which is the option that the gentleman who owns the vehicle, who happens to work at a salvage yard, I guess I should go ahead and say that as well. So he's getting all of his own parts, hence why the radiator has these markings on it. It came from a salvage yard, and used engine assembly clearly came from a salvage yard. Looks like it's in pretty good shape. I honestly have no idea what the mileage on it is, and even if you do buy a used engine assembly, you're never 100% sure what the mileage is. So I like to look over overall condition of the engine assembly, take a look at things, valve cover gaskets, look to see if there's any rust or corrosion on the engine itself. A little bit of surface rust here and there is no big deal in my opinion. All in all, it doesn't look too bad. Going to be one of the easier engine assemblies we've done in quite some time, mainly because Kia, Hyundai, they do a really good job of creating a relatively large engine bay and then sticking a pretty small engine in said engine bay. So it just makes the job of the technician a lot easier. But yeah, as you can see, I'd say we're 25% done already, mainly because the cylinder head had already come off the car. So it's just going to be, as you saw Daniel working with some electrical connections here, there, and everywhere. Take off the exhaust. We'll be putting the car up at some point here in the near future. One thing I'm wondering if we can get by the CV axles that run into the transmission. They run behind the engine. Now one of them is the one for the passenger side is bolted to the cylinder block, but if we take off those bolts in that bracket, there may very well be enough room to pull the engine assembly without removing that axle. Clearly, once the car goes up in the air, we'll be able to tell for sure. And even if we got to pull that axle out, it's not too bad. Not that big of a deal. So, yeah, that's the long short of it. Time for me to top off my coffee and get started. So, stay tuned. All right, here we are underneath the vehicle. Clearly, the exhaust has already been disconnected from the engine, considering it goes onto the cylinder head. But I'm going to go ahead and remove this O2 sensor and then just drop this segment of exhaust here. And like I said, there might be enough room to remove the engine assembly and put in a new one without taking out that axle. But it's not that much work to take it out, and just to make life a little easier, not only pulling it out, but putting the new one into place. We're going to go ahead and pull that out just to make sure, as we're putting the new engine assembly in place, we don't whack into it or damage it or anything like that. Other than that, AC compressor right here, it's going to need to come off. The crank pulley or harmonic balancer will definitely have to come off, because if we try to go this way with the engine to separate it, that crank pulley is going to run right into the body. Power steering pump up there, and alternator right there. So yeah, not too bad. Since the car is up, I'll go ahead and get cracking on that O2 sensor in the exhaust. Alright, so the exhaust is down. Both the primary and secondary catalytic converters are gone. Since it's up, I'll go ahead, just disconnect the axle mounts to the engine block, as well as I'll go ahead and pop off this AC compressor, and I might as well drain that radiator, though I don't think there's much in it. There's bolts on the AC compressor. Look a little rusty, kind of like the bolts did on the exhaust segments. So what I'm just doing is going ahead and coating it with some lubrication. WD-40, it's a cult classic. If that doesn't work, a little bit hardcore, a little bit more hardcore would this be this PV blasting agent. Both great catalysts. Do a really good job of loosening things up, so I'll give that a couple of minutes to do that. In the meanwhile, I will go ahead, bring the car down a little bit, pop this wheel off, and go after that axle as well as the harmonic balancer. It would appear we got a broken wheel stud. Let's see if we can replace that for him too. Alright, so I went ahead and put a second drip pan down just to catch that transmission fluid when it comes out. Keep track of how much transmission fluid you lose. Most of the times it's a few teaspoons, not that bad. You can very easily top it off. But sometimes, especially if the car is leaning one way or the other, you could lose more than that, and you don't want to be low on transmission fluid driving. Excellent. As you can see, I'm losing much more than a teaspoon right now. So we're going to have to check the transmission fluid level when the job is done and put in what will probably be half a quart to a quart if it continues at this rate. Now I just went ahead and stuck in a shop towel, just a red shop towel. It's kind of just to minimize the amount of transmission fluid we're losing. Don't wedge it too far in there that you lose it, so just stick a little bit in there to stop the leak. I also recommend marking your drive belt so you're not playing guessing games to figure out which one is which. Alright, well, you may have noticed that, well, hey, there's now music emanating from that car. Apparently he's having some audio issues. But you may have noticed as I was dropping this AC compressor that one bolt in particular was giving a little bit of a hard time. And I believe it was that one, what would be the top right bolt, mainly because I don't think it was necessarily meant to come off with these AC lines still intact. It's still attached, I guess I should say. Reason why I didn't disconnect them is because then I got to break out the machine to evacuate all the Freon out of the car to not destroy the environment and whatnot. And then after recovering all that, then I got to disconnect the lines and then disconnect the compressor. Once we put the new engine assembly back into place, then I've got to take all that Freon and put it back into the system. So what I would rather do is save half that hassle. You can obviously disconnect the AC compressor without disconnecting the lines. So if you are doing a job of, relatively large magnitude to where an AC compressor needs to be out of the way to do your job, don't disconnect the lines. A, don't just disconnect the lines and let that shit go up into the atmosphere because A, it's morally and ethically wrong for the environment. And B, if the EPA sees you, they're going to fine you big time. So keep that in mind. In this situation, the AC compressor will be fine to just dangle right there for a little while. What I will wind up doing is grabbing another bungee cord and probably finding a spot up here to attach it, just so it's not putting tension on the AC lines, put the tension on the bungee cord, similar to what I did with the brake caliper. As you can see, this side's getting pretty naked. Coming over here, harmonic balancer will wait until the car comes down, because it looks like that overhead motor mount, engine mount, will need to come down to do that. But since it's up in the air, I might as well go ahead and just loosen that alternator bolt. But making good progress. Alright, as you can see, the alternator has been taken off. Kind of sat that aside. Also went ahead and removed the power steering pump. Just use a cable tie to kind of tuck it out of the way. Again, didn't want to disconnect the lines and hoses because I'm trying to minimize the loss of fluids. Also went ahead and grabbed that bungee cord for the AC compressor so it's not dangling on its lines. About at the point where we can disconnect this overhead engine mount and take off that harmonic balancer. But before I do that, I'm going to bring the car back up into the air and just get all of the lower transmission bolts off. So that way, once the car comes down, it will not need to go back up again. And then, of course, this hood will have to come off. So, here we go. Ooh, alright, lower transmission bolts, including the lower bolt for the starter, are all off. Again, AC compressor. It's no longer dangling on the lines, but hanging from that bungee cord, bungee cable, whatever we're going to call it. And I would say that's about it for what needs to be done down here until the car comes down and that harmonic balancer needs to come off, of course. Everything else looks like it's up top. That bolt right there that threads in from this side will be a little tricky to get to, but shouldn't be too much of a pain. Yeah, are ready to come on down. Alright, here we are a short while later. Already taken the starter motor off, as well as all of the bolts around the perimeter of the transmission, with the exception of one to kind of hold it in place until we're ready to pull it. That one down there was a little bit tricky, but I did get it off. Also went ahead and took care of this engine mount over here, pulled that off, and then via a jack that's underneath the car, lowered the engine down to be able to pull off that harmonic balancer, which you can see in there is nothing but a timing belt now. So we got the harmonic balancer here. Wasn't too bad to kick off. Starter motor here, alternator there, engine mount there. So yeah, we're pretty much there. All electrics are off. All the bolt-on accessories that would be in the way are off. All we need to do now, pull the hood off, bring in the hoist, get it set, pull out that remaining bolt, and then up and at 'em. So yeah, say it should be out within the hour. Time to lose the hood. All right, hood's off. Hoist is ready to go. Time to get her done. I realized as I was putting the chain for the hoist in place that I had missed a step, and that being that I didn't separate the flex plate from the torque converter. Flex plate is pretty much a flywheel for an automatic transmission. In fact, some people call them flywheels even in automatic transmission. Technically, only manual transmissions have flywheels. Automatic transmissions have flex plates. Regardless, I realize that I haven't taken those bolts out yet, so separating the engine and transmission would be a little challenging. The torque converter would probably come along with it, which would mean it would never be able to get out. So better for me to notice it now than after I already separate the two, and it happens. You miss steps, especially on a Monday morning. Can't blame me too much. Here we go. Alright, they're off. It's amazing what you find the further you go into working on cars. I can tell already that this engine and transmission have been separated once before, mainly because I took 3 bolts from the torque converter. There are 4 studs. I highly doubt the folks at Kia did that themselves. So that leads me to believe the 2 have been separated before. What that means, not really much of anything. It just means that either the transmission was replaced, the engine assembly at one point had been replaced, or maybe something like the torque converter or flex plate had been replaced. So that's what I found. Regardless, now that that's separated, I can go ahead and pull this beast off. Time to get it out. Yeah. No doubt. Now, if you're wondering why that took so damn long, and why there was constant adjusting, this would be your torque converter, and said torque converter was deciding to come with it. No fun. But it didn't take too long. Came out pretty easily. So all's well that ends well, right? Alright, here I am in the bowels of the beast. I'm taking a look and put that torque converter in, and I did describe that I only took 3 nuts off when there are in fact 4, and I can see why. One of these studs from the torque converter, this one here, is totally stripped, so that just further emphasizes and confirms my belief that the engine and transmission in this car have been separated before, and whoever put them back together must have cross-threaded the heck out of that stud with the nut to the point where it just wouldn't go on. So I'm going to call the vehicle owner, see if he wants to invest in a new torque converter. Before doing that, I'm going to take my tap and die set and see if I can just bring these threads on here back to life. If I can't rethread that, then one of 2 things will have to happen. Either A, he invests in a new torque converter, or B, he just says screw it and we put it back together with the 3 nuts that was on it when I took it off. So that's that. Now it's time to go over to that other engine. Alright, here's the old, here's the new. And again, that further emphasizes my belief that the two of them came apart before. Those chalk markings you see on that, that's from a salvage yard. So I don't know if the entire engine assembly had been replaced at one point. I don't see any other markings on the engine assembly that would say that it was oh wait, hold on. Yeah, this is a used engine. That little, you're not going to be able to pick it up with a camera, but that little stamp that's glued there says LKQ, the salvage yard. Yeah, so this is a used engine and a used flywheel. Whoever did it before definitely messed some stuff up. But anyway, here comes the point in time where pretty much go over this engine, and there will be some things that we'll be reusing from the old engine and putting onto the new engine. Obviously the bolt-on accessories like the alternator, AC compressor, and power steering pump, this one didn't come with new ones, so those will be reused. Other things we like to reuse, the intake manifold will be reused, as well as a throttle body. We could get away with just swapping the throttle bodies. I like to keep throttle bodies with the car they were originally assigned to, just a little quirk of mine. But other than that, the only other thing I think will be retained will probably be this harmonic balancer crank pulley, just because that one looks a little rusty. That one I know isn't rusty and works just fine. Other than that though, this is when we go over the used engine that will be going inside the car and replace anything necessary. So I'll pop off this cover, take a look at the timing belt as well as the camshaft seals and the crankshaft seal, make sure none of those are showing signs of leaking, go over the spark plugs, ignition system, and just the various gaskets on the cars, valve cover gasket, oil pan gasket, all that good stuff. Just because it's a lot easier to replace components when the engine is sitting like this as opposed to it being inside the car. So I'm going to do that and check back in a little while. As you can see, here's the old one. Taking off all the parts from the new one. I got a little sidetracked. Another client showed up with a 2006 Hyundai Accent. Nothing really special here. It was just an overall once-over. Check engine light diagnosis and whatnot. I believe she's going to jump on some spark plugs and a valve cover gasket. But before we do that, as we're waiting on parts, we got this in the interim. Daniel has gone ahead and popped this into place. Seems to fit about as well as the old one did. That's good. Starting to look like an engine again. Got a power steering pump on. A alternator is on. About to bring it up in the air and put that AC compressor back on. Exhaust. That other bolt for the starter. The axle. Getting there. Making pretty good progress. It's 2:30, 3:30. I think that clock's wrong. Whole time change thing always freaks me out. No, it's 2:30. It's right. Anyway, back to it. Oh, welcome back. As you can see, good amount of progress has been made. AC compressor is back on and in place. Also put this lower radiator hose in place. Exhaust manifold / primary catalytic converter is in place, although I put a nut to hold it there, but it's not bolted to the cylinder head just yet. But I wanted to get the exhaust segments in place, so O2 sensor is on and tight. Make sure not to over tight your O2 sensors. Make them snug, not super tight. Went ahead and bolted this segment of the exhaust to the primary cat, including the secondary cat, which has been bolted to the back segment of exhaust. All the exhaust. As always, we put an anti-seize lubricant on all of the hardware just to make life easier, whether it's us or another technician further down the road that might need to take a segment of exhaust off. That anti-seize, anti-corrosion lubricant will hopefully stop things from breaking when they put it on. Before the exhaust went on, I also went ahead and put the CV axle, passenger side CV axle in place, brackets on, it's in. Clearly not attached to the spindle yet. I'll wait until I bring the car down a little bit. So all the bolt-on accessories are on, the belts are on, but as you can see, they are not tight by any stretch of the imagination. That will wait until the car comes back down. So I'm just giving a once-over. Oh yeah, also transmission bolts all the way around have been put back and tightened, as well as that last bolt for the starter motor. Everything looks pretty good down here. I'm just giving it a once-over to make sure before I bring it down. I think it's good. I think it's time to bring it down about halfway, put this spindle and whatnot back together, and it should be good. Right on. It's all back together. The only other thing I have to do here is knock that into that little notch to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. But other than that, it seems to be good to go. Alright, as far as up here is concerned, I want to take this little 10 mil and just put that AC line bracket back in place. Other than that, tension the belts, tighten everything down. Intake manifold still has to go on, still need to put oil in the beast, swap the oil cap with the old valve cover, because I mean that'll work just fine, but it is broken. Might as well replace it with the one that's functional. But yeah, so I'm gonna knock that out real quick. Alright. Belts are tight. Everything tensioned. Beautimous. That AC line has been bolted back into place. Now we just got stuff up top. I'm going to leave that to my compadre, Mr. Daniel, to do, because we got some of the parts here for this Hyundai Accent. Valve cover gasket and spark plugs have arrived. And this vehicle needs to be done by close of business today, whereas that vehicle does not. And it is 20 minutes to 4. So, time to get cracking on this. Looks like an engine. Everything's installed clearly as I was working on that Hyundai. Daniel went ahead and put on the intake manifold. As well as connected all the wiring, throttle cables, ignition system, airbox went back into place, battery. Went ahead and put fluids in. We didn't lose any R134 alpha. We didn't lose any power steering, which was good. Power steering fluid makes an awful mess. I hate it more than I hate motor oil, engine oil. Oil in the crankcase. Coolant and water inside the radiator and cooling system. So we're just about ready to fire her up. One other thing that we need to make sure of is to, once the car is running, check the transmission fluid level. I'm going to guess it's about a half a quart low. Just a guess though. Oh yeah, we'll be firing it up here in a little bit. Not too bad for a day's work. Moment of truth. It's rejecting coolant. Well, the engine's purring like a kitten, although it seems to be rejecting a lot of coolant. Can't imagine there was any in there. I know this radiator's used. probably a lot of air in there, so just going to monitor it, see how she goes, make sure she winds up taking that coolant. Get all that air out of the system. Check the transmission fluid level. But that engine sounds pretty smooth. I'm very happy, very happy. When somebody brings their own engine that they get from a salvage yard, it sometimes makes me a little weary. Never know what to really expect. But in this case, it seems like it's happened pretty well. So, kudos for that. Alright, we're just about done here. Hope you enjoyed watching. Hope you learned something. If nothing else, I hope you learn. Take care of your small problems before they become big problems. This was a simple radiator issue that would have cost a couple $100. Instead, now it's up over $1,000. Yes, take care of your small issues. If you liked what you saw, please go down and click the like button. If you didn't like what you saw, go ahead and click that don't like button. If you're going to click that don't like button, please also go down and leave a comment explaining why you didn't like. Maybe we can change something. And if you like what you see and you want to see more, please hit the subscribe button. That way we know to keep making videos. Anyway, this is Mark, Pro Auto Repair. This is Daniel. You've been watching Octane Auto Tips. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Hello again. I know I already said goodbye to everybody, but it wasn't over. After about 10 minutes of the engine running, it was still rejecting coolant from the radiator. White smoke was pouring out of the exhaust pipe, and it smelled like coolant. Now, to those of you out there who've had experience with engines, you technicians, fellow technicians out there, you know that that's a dead giveaway that the head gasket is fried. And this just goes back to what I was saying, looking over the car, or looking over the used engine, that I'm never really comfortable when somebody gets their own used part, because we never know the history behind it. Now we know the history behind it. That head gasket was fried. Now, I looked over as much as I could. I put a new valve cover gasket on it. Oil pan was not leaking, so I didn't reseal that. We put in new spark plugs. The spark plugs that actually came out of it looked brand new. They were cheap, very cheap though, auto lights. And I don't use auto lights for anything. I don't even care if it's an American car. I do not put auto light spark plugs in because I don't trust them. So, I mean, there was really no way for us to know that head gasket was fried. So, a bit of a futile effort. Feel badly for the gentleman who owns the vehicle, but it is what it is. So, we advised him to let us go ahead and get him an engine, from a source that we know it's trusted, and we also know it's going to come with a 2-year warranty, to where if we go through all that trouble, we know we're being reimbursed, and we'll get a proper engine. So, just goes to show, when you go to a salvage yard and get something, you never know what you're getting. So, either way, it is what it is. I'm taking it one step at a time. So, hope you all enjoyed watching. Have a wonderful day.